too.
Wow, what a day. I mean, it's NFL playoff weekend. But who's watching football? Because they just stormed the Capitol. And you thought the Georgia Senate runoffs were going to be the big story? Man, never before have we seen this. I mean, if 2020 was the year that was going to be whatever, 2021 is the year that's going to be even more whatever. It's tonight on Rob Nelson Live. What a day in politics, everybody. Welcome to the show. You know what? I'm a big sports fan. A lot of you know that. I'm a big football fan. And I was all excited because wild card weekend this weekend. You know, if you know football, wild card weekend's the weekend where you have the first playoff games. Like the two teams on each conference that get the best records get to sit out. That's the Green Bay Packers. Woohoo! My team, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And then the two teams that barely made it in play in a playoff game. You got 4 playoff games, whatever. It's a big playoff football weekend. And I think that politics is a lot like football. And that's where I was going to start tonight's show before literally the world blew up in politics. But it's still true. Politics and football are a lot the same. I mean, think about it. You know, if you're a sports fan, and if you're not, you can probably relate to this anyway. I mean, you got bitter rivalries, right? You got fanatics, really. I mean, the word fanatic comes from the Latin for, being a fanatic. You got fanatics in sports. You got fanatics in politics. Clearly, you got fanatics in politics. You have both sides always see everything the way they see it, right? So like a play happens, the refs make a call, and one half of the crowd is like, what? That was the worst call ever. And the other side's, no, it was a totally good call. And you watch it on instant replay, and you still have two totally different views. Sound familiar? Sound like the political world we're living in, where something happens and one side sees it completely different than the other when we're looking at the same video, the same footage, right? I mean, sports and politics have so much in common, from drama, narratives, storylines, long-seated franchises that don't want to give up, ultimately winning the big prizes. The only real difference between sports and politics is that sports is actually like a game we play, and politics is about our lives. What's happening in the world, in our country right now, is about our lives. I mean, it's entertaining. Trump made politics entertaining for the last 4 years. But it's our lives right now. And we saw it blow up today. I mean, yesterday was the Georgia runoff races, right? And the election happened, and everyone thought there was going to be more fraud. Is there not going to be? And I said I didn't think the Republicans were going to pull it off. 2 crappy candidates. I mean, really. I mean, Perdue's like this guy who's like barely there, barely shows up. He's kind of like a crook. He's an old dude, he's not very energetic. And then Senator Loeffler, she's like an Ann Coulter lookalike and sound-alike, except she looks like a soundbite Barbie doll. And she just really has no real connection to people when she's talking. I mean, 2 terrible candidates. And, one's already lost and the other's razor thin. And that was the big story. And today was the day they come to Congress and the electors get together and the whole thing finally certifies or doesn't. And there were going to be the objections. We talked about that, and the senators and the House members who would oppose it. And that was going to be a big deal. As I said before, you've had people oppose a lot. You've had people oppose. You had Barbara Boxer in 2005, and a congresswoman both, said the election in Ohio wasn't fair and called a challenge. It's been done. It was done in 2001 with Al Gore. They called a challenge. It was done in 1969 with Nixon. They called a challenge, just like they were going to do today, except more people were going to do it today. You were going to have 150 members of Congress in the House, and probably 10, 12, 13 senators all say it wasn't fair. And I get it. On one side of this equation, you're all going, well, the whole thing's a joke. The election was fair. Trump's made it into something it isn't. But clearly, not just Trump and not just people who are Trump sycophants. You had a lot of people like Ted Cruz saying, honestly, we need to just look at this. We need to look at it. We should have an election commission to explore it for 10 days. Just step back for 10 days and let everybody see that this was fair or wasn't. But let's just look at it. and let's let half the country go to sleep not thinking they got gypped. I think that was a fair thing to want. And that's what was going to happen. Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence, he was going to, monkey arms. Yes, Kansas City. Kansas City's my AFC team. Packers are my team, NFC, other conference. I'm fine with the Chiefs. Chiefs, Packers, Super Bowl, I'm good with that. That would be like the Trump-Hillary election all over again. So, that was where it was supposed to go, right? That's what was supposed to happen. And Pence, of course, was Pence ever going to say the electoral votes didn't count? No, he was never going to do that. I don't know pipe people were smoking that they thought Mike Pence, Mr. Straight and Narrow, was going to come out and open the electoral votes and go, I'm not certifying them. It's a largely ceremonial role the vice president plays. Article 2 of the Constitution lets the vice president open the ballots, and then they are counted. That's how it sort of says. It says, and they are counted. Doesn't say he counts them. Doesn't say he decides. And had he done it, it would have gone to all kinds of legal challenges, and he probably would have lost. But he was never going to do it. He was never going to be that guy. I'm not saying he should or shouldn't have been. We'll come back to that. But he's never going to be that guy. But what happened today changes everything. Everything changes. I mean, suddenly you started out the day with thousands and thousands, and we have some pictures we'll show you in a little while, but I mean, we're talking, there must have been close to 500,000 people, I think, packed in down the Washington, down the stretch down to the monument and surrounding the Capitol. I mean, we'll get the real numbers, but it's tens and tens and tens of thousands of people there protesting what they think was a stolen election, what they think was an unfair election. And in fairness to them, they never really got a chance because, you can say there were court challenges and all this, but anytime anyone said election fraud, it was so immediately dismissed by the media and by anyone who didn't agree with it that it just made people feel like, listen, we have a legitimate gripe. Hear us out. At least explore it. Dismissing it, silencing it, Twitter marking it as untrue information only made people more convinced. So thousands and thousands of people descended on Washington on the Capitol protest. And that was pretty cool. I mean, I like protests. I'm a big fan. You got a right to protest. Come out, have your voice heard. What happened next was craziness. 9/11 all over again. I mean, nothing like this has ever happened. I mean, you saw people starting to climb. Crafty, throw in some of the pics as we go. You saw people climbing up the Capitol steps. And literally starting to surround up into the Capitol, see, they're on scaffolding there. They're climbing that wall. You see that wall right there? People are climbing up it. That area where they're standing is not an area people go. After 9/11, they sealed that off. I used to live in DC, and you could run those steps. You could run down the monument, run up those steps and sort of take a view and then run back down. They sealed that whole area off. People just surged into it, and then it went next level. People broke windows and went inside. And there you see pictures, right? And I'm sure you've seen them on the screens. They barricaded up the doors. You got cops and Secret Service. See the guy's face sticking through there? And they're pointing the guns out at him. And meanwhile, they're evacuating members of Congress. People are lying on the floor. I mean, and again, it was big. And that's just an amazing one sitting. I think that's the speaker's desk, or if it's not the speaker's desk, that might be the Senate, and it might be the where the vice president sits. I mean, people were sitting, someone sat at Nancy Pelosi's desk and wrote a note, we're not going to give up. How these people got in and of itself is an amazing thing, right? They bust in a couple windows. I mean, just on a side note, what were the Capitol Police thinking? Did they ever do a planning? What if a protest erupts and people try to come in? I guess not. They certainly weren't prepared for this. I mean, and suddenly you had people inside, and somebody got shot. We don't know the details on that. And eventually they dragged everybody out, put gas masks on, shot tear gas inside the Capitol, put gas masks on members. On a side note, I think a lot of our members of Congress are elites and out of touch. And I could just see them all cowering on the floor, hands over their heads, like a bunch of wimps. Honestly, I don't think people weren't charging in with guns shooting. They were busting in. And I'm not saying they should have been, but they were kind of bustering in. Good to see you too. Good to see you too. In Giggly. I get it right this time in Giggly. So in they go. So here's what we got a tale of two cities, because I'm going to point out the vast majority of those people protesting, and I've got one of them who's going to come on in a minute with me, were not violent. And we're just milling around. In fact, they almost look like anti-protesters. They're kind of all just wandering around. Like when like the libs protested and when George Floyd happened, like people were like in unison, chanting, marching, go, go, go. This was like people wandering around, like having a big like kind of walkabout. But a small number busted in. And that small number is going to get all the attention there is to get. They're going to get 150% of the attention. And I'm not saying it's okay that they busted in. And everyone who's a conservative right now is pissed. The conservatives are pissed because they're like, we made it this whole way saying when we protest, nothing bad happens. You know, you guys go out and torch cars and bust into buildings. We do it. It's all peaceful. And suddenly, except for the first time in like 150 years, people busted into the Capitol, you know, and they had to evacuate literally the Congress. I don't think that's ever happened in American history before. And then let's not over exaggerate it. It also, like I said, they didn't come in with like machine guns and start shooting people down. They busted in. It's like the kids got in, got in trouble, get caught. People are going to get arrested. People are going to go to jail. I mean, CNN, Jake Tapper needs to take a chill pill with the whole, this, you know, seditious acts of treason, you know, an insurrection. It wasn't insurrection. It's not sedition. They weren't going to overthrow the government. They weren't coming in and gunning down members of Congress. They were like pissed off and they busted in and sat down. Like, and the Capitol Hill Police and Secret Service weren't prepared. I'm not saying it's okay they did it, but let's not make it something it wasn't, you know? Pandering to the right is what created the chaos today. I'm going to take a different side on that, monkey arms. I don't think pandering to the right's what created the chaos today. I actually think ignoring the right is what created the chaos today. I actually think allowing all the protests that went on around George Floyd and Black Lives Matter to get depicted always as peaceful, always as okay. I mean, I was in those protests, and I'm okay that they happened. I'm not against the fact that they happened, but I was in them. I was in Los Angeles among some of the biggest ones. There were thousands of people. I wasn't standing in front of buildings that were bashed to shreds, glass busted out, cars burning. And the media depicted it as largely peaceful protests. So I think you had the right, a lot of people on the right watching, going, you know, Portland, months of literal nonstop violence, attacking federal buildings, creating compounds, you know, attacking police officers. And it just kept getting depicted as mostly peaceful. And I think people on the right were like, what the F? Like, you know, I mean, my thing is also, it's sooner or later this was going to happen. Sooner or later, a lot of frustrated middle Americans who are right of center were going to erupt and go, you know what, we've had enough. And this is a pretty mild version of that. I'm just saying we made it okay to protest on the streets every day and to vandalize buildings and burn cars in the streets. So I don't think we should totally lose our shit over the fact that some people busted through the windows and sat down in seats of Congress. Had they gone in and started shooting people, it'd be a different story. And the majority of the people there were not violent. So we'll get to more of your comments. Oh, did you see they think Antifa members? Yeah, you know, and I'm sure some of that was. Again, I don't want to go to that spot where it's all like blame the Antifa. I'm sure Antifa members dressed up as mega supporters, wearing mega hats and all that, and Trump supporters. But the reality is, a lot of this was Trump supporters. Not the majority weren't doing this, and some were like, enough. You know, there's a little anarchist in each side of the equation. Let me real quickly. We've got a guy on the line here. I want to bring him on because I want to let him get to bed. And Bill, thanks for being on the show with us. Bill's in Washington. He was at the protests. We'll see how his audio's doing. Thanks for being here, Bill. I know it's late for you too. You had a long day. Can you hear us okay, Bill? I think Bill's
Thank you, Rob. I think you introduced. Yeah, you're breaking up pretty good, but I'm trying to find a good spot here on camera in this building. I'm in the hotel lobby. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Bill. So, Bill, quickly tell us, what was your experience like at this thing?
You guys there?
Yeah, can you hear us? All right, Bill, we're going to have you re-enter your browser.
Re-enter the browser, do it again.
All right, can you hear me now, Bill? Yeah. Relog yourself in.
I can.
And we'll see if that works. Yep, we'll lose you for a second. So I'll bring Bill in. Bill was there, and Bill interviewed some people, and Yeah, that's a good point, Tyler. I'm not trying to conflate the political left with George Floyd. I think what I'm actually saying is, as a nation, the media is a particular part of this. The media legitimized, and again, I'm not against the BLM protests. I was at them. I'm saying the media legitimized the fact that these massive protests happened over and over and over with a lot of violence, not mostly violence, but a lot of violence. And violence at most of them. I mean, I stood next to burnt out cars and bashed out buildings in LA. I talked to people who were busting into them. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, it's payback. It's payback. You know, Portland was a mess for months, you know, and the media didn't, you know, and a lot of, in fairness, Tyler, a lot of people on the left didn't criticize it or didn't want to call it out. They said, oh, some of that was that. And I'm just saying, when you legitimize that much, now we're going to see the people on the right are going to start reacting a little bit the same way. They won't be as violent. They're not going to burn cars. But I mean, again, I'm not shocked that people finally busted through the windows of the Capitol and climbed inside. I almost find it a little humorous. I mean, everyone's making it like it's the end of the world. It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't even close. They didn't come in shooting people. It's like they vandals and they crept inside like homeless people, you know? And I'm not saying it was okay. I think it didn't help their cause, because I think most people weren't doing that. Bill, can you hear us now? We'll try one more time with you.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, Bill. So what was your take? You were there.
Sounds
we'll
good.
show some pictures and video. What was your take? Because obviously that wasn't the majority of people, but what was your take on all that?
On the violence part of it, yeah, very suspect, because by and large, I mean, everybody in the crowd was very peacefully there. And that was never an intent for anybody that I spoke with or interacted with, was to do anything that was violence. You know, we had one gal walking around with a megaphone telling us to pick up our trash. So, you know, it's you know, a different kind of crowd than what is depicted on the media. And that was a totally different experience that we had at that event.
Let's show the video of the crowd. We have a couple crowd videos that Bill took. Let's see those. You can see Bill wandering through the crowd there.
They were at the Trump rally. It's just a sea of people.
Right, we need to move up.
Wait, where's the ramp? There's a ramp where? Hey, you know. Hey, check it out. Hey, buddy, it's 3 foot wide. Go see if I can get through. Can you go see the ramp?
All right, so, you know, again, that, as I described it, Bill, it's almost like people are meandering around, like not really sure what. All right, Crafty, thanks. You can yank it. It's almost like people wandering around, like not even sure what they're doing. Like, it doesn't, you know, it's not very focused, not chanting and the whole thing. That was sort of a lot of what was going on with thousands of people.
No.
No?
Well, the first part of that, they listened to Trump. The first part was a speech that they listened to at Trump. It started, I think it was like 1 o'clock. And then everybody migrated from the White House over to the Capitol. So after Trump had given his speech, then everybody was sort of to do what they would. And most everybody ended up in front of the Capitol building, but it was definitely not an organized event. It was organic all the way. And so people that wanted to show up there, there's one point where, I don't know, I think I shared the video with you of a woman that was on top of a wall waiting people to come in, hop the wall and fill up the lawn in front of the Capitol building,
Right,
to show support. She wanted everybody there, because there wasn't anybody organizing any of this stuff. It was all organic. But it was all peaceful. It was a very high energy experience.
Well, it wasn't all,
but
it wasn't all
peaceful.
Well, it wasn't all peaceful. Obviously, they climbed up and busted inside the Capitol. I mean, that part wasn't peaceful.
Yes, agreed.
I mean, you can't.
But you know,
again,
it's like
Bill. You can't.
I think
Bill, you can't. Bill, you can't will that away, right? I know a lot of people are going to want to say, well, that whatever. It's the same way I said with the protests around BLM. You can't just go, well, the people busting in don't count. Like, these people climbed inside the Capitol. You got, you know, guys pointing guns through the glass at them, like barricaded up.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a far cry, though, from what happened today and what you've seen with Antifa and the BLM in their exercising of their free speech. and their so-called peaceful protests, which are turning over police cars and lighting them on fire, breaking businesses apart, and destroying communities. I mean, this is a far cry garbage, and I just don't even see it's on the same category. Agreed. Yeah, you can't just discount the any violence that's going on, but I think it's hard to say, oh, that's on an equivalent level, especially when you look at a crowd that's 500,000 plus people that migrates from one end of the mall to the other, and that's the 100th or 1,000th of a percent of the people that decide to do something stupid.
Yeah, I get it. And, that's going to get all the media attention, and that. And I get it. That's how it is. That's the most eye-catching thing. Crafty, let's take a look at the bad quality video we have, but you see how many people are there. This is when Trump is talking.
They'll knock out Lincoln, too, by the way. They've been taking his statue down, but then we signed into the law. You hurt our monuments, you hurt our heroes, you go to jail for 10 years, and everything stopped, And they could use Rudy.
I mean, thanks, Crafty. So, and that video quality isn't great on that one, but you can see when I looked at it before, it's so many people. Like, there's got to be a couple 100,000 people there.
Oh, yeah. We felt that there was about 500,000 in that spot, maybe more. It's really hard to tell.
Right. Which should tell us something. Let's finally, before I let you go, Bill, you did an interview with a guy. Cut it down. It's just about a minute, guys. To me, this was a fascinating interview because it says a lot about where I want to go to tonight, about what I think is coming out of this. So let's take a look at Bill's interviewing this fellow protester, who's a former, by the way, it's cut out of it, but I think he's a Marine, right? He was in the Marines. He's a vet either way.
Our elections are the bedrock of our democracy. We all see some of the atrocities that happen during our elections. But again, you have the media and the rhinos and the Democrats who want to pretend like that's not an issue. I don't feel like we've gotten due process. There's a lot of Americans who voted, right, and want to see their vote count. And what I love about this country, this great country that I would have fought and died for, is it allows us the freedom to do exactly what we're doing here, right? To express our concern, because again, we the people, right? Not just this, right? Civil rights, right? In any other country, those type of protests wouldn't have been allowed, right? But it was allowed, and now blacks, right? It's better now, right? Not perfect, but definitely better. We're the last great stronghold in this great world, freedom and democracy. And if we let this go, it falls everywhere else. This just emboldens me, right, to continue to fight. We don't just stop here. It just doesn't just go away.
It's the beginning.
Yeah, it's just the beginning, exactly.
So, Bill, thank you for doing that interview. I think Bill's frozen. Let's pull him down, Crafty. Bill, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Bill. Guys, so here's what I want to jump into, and I want to jump off that interview, and I want to pick up a comment here that I see Crusen's made. Crafty, can we pop that Crusen comment up? This one right there. There we go. No, actually, that wasn't it. Yeah. So, Crusen, I think this why are we talking about BLM? Again, you know me, I'm talking about BLM because I'm saying and I'm not taking away from what happened today. I'm going to focus on that, but because I think we set up an environment. It's like everybody does something, and then when the other side does it, they get pissed. And my whole point is, you had protests for months and months and months, and many of them had a lot of violence in them, and they were at an outrage that they perceived had happened. And some people felt that outrage was legitimate. Some people felt it was extended. I've said, exaggerated. Not that racial injustice is exaggerated, but, I made the point that tons of white people out protesting, and, black people in the inner cities were no part of it. The reason I make the comparison is because I think it set the mindset for we are moving into a climate where everybody now feels when things don't go the way they want them to go, you do one of two things. First, you dismiss anything and everything that says it's not true. This is what you saw with the election. This is what you saw with the extreme side of the Trump of the Trump camp, which was everything was false. It was all stolen. It was all rigged. It doesn't matter. If the judges don't agree with us, then the judges are corrupt. If the legislatures don't agree with us, the legislature is corrupt. If the Supreme Court doesn't agree with us, they're afraid to stand up. If Mike Pence isn't willing to do it, Mike Pence is a coward. It's sort of like anything that doesn't conform to my view and what I think, I am going to dismiss out of hand automatically. That's what's happened in this election thing. I merely point out that's what I believe happened for the last couple of years, and we're building toward it around everything involving Trump. It's like it didn't matter how many times you proved something. It didn't matter how many times you proved Russian collusion didn't happen. It must have happened. Same argument that it's a repeat. I will not hear what I don't want to hear. And we've moved toward that mindset to where that's what we all do now. If you don't say what I agree with, I dismiss it. I don't care what facts you show me. I don't care what evidence you show me. I don't care how much information you show me. Even if the people that should be on my side aren't on my side, they must all be sellouts too. That dynamic started over the last couple of years, and get ready. It's going to continue with a lot of it coming from the right. It's not going to end. That young guy's interview there was pretty articulate. Black dude out there saying, look, this is, I feel this election wasn't fair. I think a lot of people didn't get a fair shake on this, and we're pissed, and this is the beginning. The second thing that happens is you cross lines. We've gotten to a point where we are now all willing to just get up in each other's faces. We've become like Karen times 100,000. It's like we've all been cloned Karen, and everybody's in. So now it shouldn't be a shocker that people busted through the windows and climbed into the Capitol. It kind of would have been unheard of. 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, you could never even imagine 10 years ago this happening. Just wouldn't have, so we've entered a phase, guys. We've entered an era where nothing's off limits anymore. And I think people need to realize we're heading into this. Tyler, I already addressed that comment. And again, I'm not conflating the political left with George Floyd. Yeah, I get it, Monkey Arms, but that's not my point. You guys are focusing on the wrong thing. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're focusing on the part of the argument that you want that works for you. I don't give an F if BLM was a civil rights movement and this was a political one. My point is we've created a culture. We've created a culture where both sides are so divided that they don't care about anything other than what they want. And let me back up for a second, okay? Let me point something out here. Politics is a dirty game. And I have always argued that Democrats play politics better than Republicans do. I mean, you think about it. The biggest hard asses in politics, in my mind, have always been Democrats. Democrats, historically, I mean, you look at the hard-ass presidents. Nixon wasn't like a hard-ass president. Nixon was kind of a bit of a crook and a racist and all kinds of things. He was also a pretty good statesman. But, Nixon resigned rather than drag the country through the full-out impeachment. And, history showed that Nixon did. And Ford pardoned him, knowing it would probably, it was the best thing to do to keep the country at peace, even though it would cost him re-election. Jimmy Carter's the one exception. Well, Jimmy Carter got elected because everything else happened. And Jimmy Carter couldn't have gotten elected at any other time. Sort of like the least corrupt president, although he had a super corrupt cabinet and stuff around him. Not his fault. But you look, Johnson, probably the most corrupt president. I think Johnson was behind Kennedy's assassination. I know you're gonna be like conspiracy theory, but I've always thought it, I mean, the Kennedys, Joe Kennedy would do anything to get his kids in office. And John F. Kennedy, come on. I mean, I was in the Clinton administration. I saw what they did. I saw what people like Rahm Emanuel would do to make sure they won, or George Stephanopoulos. It's a dirty, hardball game, and Democrats play it ruthlessly and really well. I mean, one exception to that, might be Bobby Kennedy. I think Bobby Kennedy was actually not going to be what the others were. But it's an interesting anecdote, so I actually knew somebody who was pretty close. Well, I didn't know him like a close friend of mine, but knew someone who was pretty close to to Richard Goodwin, who was a close Kennedy aide. He was a JFK aide, and he was actually a big part of, he wrote and a big Johnson aide, and he wrote the Great Society speech. The Great Society speech that Johnson gave, Richard Goodwin wrote that speech. The Civil Rights speech, the Selma after Bloody Sunday, Richard Goodwin wrote that speech. You know, Obama consulted with Richard Goodwin. This guy is a hardcore. He's dead. He died 2 years ago. Liberal. I sat with Richard Goodwin in his house in Concord. It was the first time I ever really smoked a cigar. He gave me brandy and a cigar, and we were talking politics. I was working on a project for Joe Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy's oldest son, and he told me a story about how Bobby Kennedy realized one day that he could make a difference. Think about that. Think of Bobby Kennedy sitting here going, you know what? I realized I'm not actually just a political tool and a puppet and just meant to be a political machine like my father wanted and my brother was. I actually could make a difference in the world. That dawned on him as he's running for president. That's how deeply entrenched the I'm a politician and, we're all about politics was. And the crazy part of the story is he said, I really think I can do it. I think if I'm president, I can actually make the world a better place. Go figure. I think that's what they all want, but it's not. And Richard Goodwin said that or someone's going to shoot me first. And a week later, Richard Goodwin was with him at the Ambassador Hotel when he got assassinated. Trust me, it messed Richard Goodwin up. He moved to New Hampshire, lived in the mountains, became an alcoholic. Brilliant, brilliant guy. But point of the story is, I think Democrats play hardball better than Republicans. I think they always have. It's like in football. Democrats, Republicans play not to lose. It's like it's like what they call preventive defense, when you just make sure they don't get the ball past us. And, and you watch teams who play not to lose. The Democrats play to win. And now you're going to see a push to create a Republican Party that plays to win. So I'm prognosticizing at what the future looks like here, guys. I'm not taking a side on who's right or wrong. I'm telling you what I think is going to happen. You can say Republicans are wrong to have contested this election. They had every right to contest it. They had every right to want to see it. I agree. I agree. Trump went way too far. Trump led people on and on. He knows he lost the election, or he doesn't, and he's a sociopath. But but it doesn't matter. Millions of people feel like they were disenfranchised and they're pissed. And honestly, if you're fair, if tables were turned, how far would Democrats have gone in this scenario? I mean, if Kamala Harris was vice president right now and the tables were turned and Trump had won and it was contested by the left, do you think Kamala Harris would have said, I do have the power to certify the vote? I don't know. She might have.
Rob, yeah. They already did. They preempted the election by having their own riots the whole year.
No.
Oh, sure. No. Now let's go ahead and give them a pass. Rob, no. Not like you, by the way, to just go ahead and just say, oh, sure. You know what? Everyone thinks it. And you've said it and thought it before, too, that it's like, I wonder if they did this strategically in advance of the elections.
Okay. Let me be clear, guys. I don't agree with Crafty on this. I have said what he's saying, but I don't think they intentionally. I think what they intentionally did was they knew mail-in ballot. Look, let's be clear on the fraud thing. Mail-in balloting, I've said it a million times, leads to fraud. And not having a lot of safeguards leads to fraud. I'm all for expanding the electorate. When I was doing my political thing back in the 90s, we tried to get a bill passed in multiple states that would allow for students to vote on campuses. You could go on campus and vote and register in the place you went to school and make that your residence. And it got shot down by Democrats because they didn't want a bunch of college students on a 40,000 student campus being able to elect a member of Congress. Neither party wants to enfranchise people who won't vote for them. Bottom line, it's pure politics. And Democrats knew that widespread mail-in voting would get more Democrats to the polls, would get more Democratic votes. And I'm sure they knew there was a certain amount of baked-in fraud that would happen. There's an election lawsuit in Georgia that kind of got overlooked a lot in the news, right? And it was brought by some Republicans, obviously, and they were challenging an organization that Stacey Abrams was backing, and a law that was allowing people, and it actually happened, that allowed people who had no longer had residences in Georgia, who had changed their address to no longer live in the state, to still vote as if they lived in the state. And the judge threw it out and said that there was not enough merit to the case. The judge happened to be Stacey Abrams' sister, who, when challenged on not recusing herself, said, you're making an assumption that because it's my sister's political cause, I'm not impartial. Duh, that's the whole point of recusal. But my point is, there was all kinds of irregularities and lack of verification that led to all kinds of problems, and will continue to. This election is done. Donald Trump is not president. Joe Biden is. Everybody needs to get used to that fact. But the chaos that's going to ensue has just begun, because we have created a massive movement of Americans who feel disenfranchised, partially around the voting, but feel disenfranchised around social media platforms, around having their voice heard, that everything they say is shot down. And if you're on the left, you should worry about that, because we are going to see a massive rising up. And I don't mean a violent one necessarily, although some people think it will be, a massive pushback, a massive explosion of people saying, I've had enough. And they've had enough with traditional Republicans too. Republicans are no better than Democrats. They're all still just two parties stuck in their ways. Mitch McConnell's no better than Nancy Pelosi. To me, they're both garbage. They're both career politicians whose number one goal is political power. I worked in the White House. I spent a lot of time in Washington. I promise you guys, neither party's primary concern is you. Their concern is power, their power. It's like watch House of Cards. It's real. Fort Walton Bleach, what can we do to resolve this? Well, that's a great question. And I don't know that I have a simple answer. And maybe, I'd kind of like to toss it out to you guys. Like, where do we go from here? I mean, my point with all of this is not to take a side on whether Republicans, let me qualify that. I think I'm surprised that Republicans didn't line up more behind Trump on this. And if you're on the left, you might be like, what? But remember, it's not about whether it's true or not. We are in such a tribal mentality. Dems are good at getting the Dems to line up. Brett Kavanaugh was shot down mercilessly for doing nothing wrong. Literally, the Democrats lined up against him. Amy Coney Barrett was blasted. She would have been approved easily a couple years ago. Like, Democrats line up. Nancy Pelosi says, do it. They do it. Republicans don't. And I think you're going to see that change. I think you're going to see a new wave of Republicans getting elected who are more populist and more willing to go to the mat. So I think it's going to get uglier, not prettier. Now, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's what we have to do, because we kind of aren't playing on an even playing field. Black people getting shot in the back. Isn't everything didn't go the way I wanted to go? Oh, black people getting shot in the back isn't everything go the way I wanted to go. Well, Tyler, yes and no. I mean, I am not defending police brutality, but at the same time, I've talked to a lot of cops and a lot of black cops and a lot of anti-Trump black cops. And they will tell you that half the shootings that made the protests, nobody's contesting what happened with George Floyd. Kenosha, the Atlanta shooting, most cops will tell you they would have done the same thing, that they would have shot too. And that that those were justifiable shootings. So again, I'm not saying there isn't police. And if you talk to a lot of black cops, I mean, watch my town hall that I did in Jacksonville. We have tons of cops and tons of law enforcement and tons of black activists all talking about this. I'm not saying there isn't racism or even systemic racism. It's not my point. My point is that people tend to take the side they want. When you say everything didn't go my way, I mean, I get the frustration on the left at people not letting this election go. But in fairness, you guys didn't let Trump go for 3.5 years. I mean, from day one, there was a systematic effort to undermine his presidency. Forget about him. Think of the things that might have happened for good in this country had there not been literally an attempt to just dismantle his presidency from day one, from the media and from the Democratic Party and its leadership. I get not like, and so I'm just saying, it's not to me about things didn't go my way, guys. It's about we got to sort of acknowledge where we're at. And the only way we're going to do it is their side's always wrong, my side's always right. We're screwed. And all I'm saying is you are now going to see, you saw 3.5 years, almost 4 years of backlash against Trump. in all different ways. You are going to see a backlash against Biden. Traditional conservative Republicans who've been sitting by going, we play by the rules. You're going to see a massive movement of people going, we may not be violent, we may not take to the streets with guns, but we are tired of playing by rules that we think screw us over. Fort Walton Breach. Granted, we can put blame in many places, but is it productive to do at this point? Look, I like that you're looking for positive solutions. I guess you're right. There's no value in inherently just blaming people and how we got here. But I think understanding how we got here helps us understand where we're going. Because I think where we're going is a place we are heading into uncharted territory, you guys. Take a second and realize what happened today. Forget about the fact that most of the people out there were peacefully protesting. And I think in fairness, you gotta acknowledge that. Most people weren't climbing inside the Capitol. But that said, the fact that that's what we got to, that we got so many people so enraged about this election that you had 500,000 people marching saying it was an unfair election and millions more thinking it, whether it was or wasn't, but thinking it and believing it. And you can't just say they're all crazy. People, that's my point. People believe what they want to believe and it's reinforced. And Trump did no favors. I am not defending Trump for what he did. I think Trump, I said, has been playing a long game to position himself as the loser who got cheated, who can come back in 2024. And I think he knew it the whole time. Sure, there was election irregularities. Sure, they should not have allowed states to change their voting laws through the courts and through the governorships. That was unconstitutional. The time to challenge that was before the election, not afterward. When you challenged it afterward, too many people voted in good faith. They can amend those laws and fix those laws. Republicans sat by idly. Republicans let this all happen. Republicans take as much blame as anything for letting what happened in this election happen. And they didn't bother to do it. Mitch McConnell was too busy running his little circus show to focus on election integrity before the election if it was so effing important. So I'm not defending Trump or Republicans on this. I think Republicans are pretty lame. I think Trump, what he's done has been an incredible disservice. But I also think he's been made into the boogeyman. And what was building up in this country that Trump reflected was a frustration with a lot. And it's a frustration that a lot of Americans feel and still feel. And if you want unity, you're not going to solve it by saying you're all a bunch of crazy nuts, because they're not all crazy. A lot of people justifiably feel both economically, politically, and sort of, let's just call it in the social media sphere, disenfranchised from being able to have their voice and be heard. And we always just dismiss the other side and say, you're crazy. Could I share my thoughts on what steps the state legislatures can take to reform their voting procedures? Sure. Look, state legislatures have all the power. The irony of all this is that every contested state had a Republican state legislature. And those state legislatures could have passed laws to make safeguards around mail-in voting and to limit what that could be. They didn't do it. Now, the courts went, the governors went around them and the courts supported that. But they could have challenged that in court and they didn't. So what they could do now is they could go back, they could re-amend and make the voting safeguards necessary. Again, I'm all for expanding the vote. I'm not a guy who wants to keep the number of people voting to a minimum. But you got to do it in a way that has integrity. And mail-in voting has always, somehow we got caught in this myth that mail-in voting is not subject to fraud. You can read the FEC's reports for the last 15 years. Under Obama, talking about the number one likelihood area of fraud is around mail-in voting. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. I took my ballot, which got mailed to me in Florida. Well, somebody mailed it to me from my landlord from LA. I filled it out, dropped it in a box when I went back to LA. I didn't have to prove who I was. Anybody could have done that. They had that ballot. So again, what state legislatures could do is tighten those laws. And we should all want that. Again, just, let's be honest. If you're going to be honest, both sides are trying to build a political base. Democrats are just doing a better job of it. And the main thing you're going to see happen when it, is an attempt to ensure that political power. So Joe Biden comes in. Here's the question. Is his focus on fixing America, or is his focus on ensuring the future of the Democratic Party? And too often the focus is on ensuring the future of your party. So statehood for Puerto Rico. Oh, that's really because they care so much about Puerto Ricans. Not. And if you look, by the way, at the history of what's going to happen with Puerto Rico, it's not a shoo-in that Puerto Rico is going to get statehood. I mean, Biden's already said, they have to vote, and they sort of did vote to do it, but they've had like 7 of these votes. And if you listen to like Puerto Rican activists who are real like statehood activists or people who really want independence, they think it's a lot of bullshit what we're trying to do. And by the way, Puerto Ricans get screwed. If you don't know this, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens who can't vote. They can't vote. They're U.S. citizens. They pay taxes, but they only get partial rights because when they made Puerto Rico a territory, basically they were like, not good enough. We, can't trust the non-white people. I'm not making that up. That was literally the logic of it. It was back. It was, it was the same mindset, that black people weren't the same as white people. It was, an era when they were doing that. Puerto Ricans have been getting screwed, but if they're smart, they should actually just go for independence. But either way, I'm saying the reason they suddenly want to make Puerto Rico a state to get 2 more Democratic votes, the reason they want to suddenly create citizenship for anyone who's here illegally is votes. It's not because they care about people. It's all about votes. It's all about getting power.
Rob, we got a caller.
We got a what?
We got a caller from Reddit.
Okay, bring him on. Her on.
Yep. You got it. Fort Walton Bleach. We'll go ahead and bring you up.
Oh,
What's
wow.
up, Fort Walton Bleach?
Hello. Hello there, Rob. I didn't have anything planned. I just popped into here and saw what you were going on. And I see that the Reddit stream ended.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy what you're doing here, and I think it offers a new, fresh perspective on things.
Thanks, Fort Walton.
Absolutely critical in these times.
Thank you. Are you a liberal or a conservative or an independent?
Well, I think the best way that you can classify me is a libertarian socialist. And if you can wrap your mind around that, then we can get somewhere.
No, okay, I like this. Tell me quickly, what is I know what a libertarian, I mean, I have my own idea what that means, but tell me what a libertarian socialist is.
Well, the way that I see it here, and I did a little bit of research on it, is that you want to make sure that you can allow for as much freedom as possible, but you understand that there's going to have to be some sort of rules in place for that.
But where's the socialist part?
Well, you have certain rules. I think that we need universal basic health care to maximize those things. I think that should be I think that's a kind of inherent in the preamble of the Constitution to secure the blessed liberties to ourselves and our posterity.
Mm-hmm. So I like this. Fort Walton, so what I like about this is an interesting spot I've explored, which is because I often joke I'm a libertarian and I was in favor of Bernie Sanders. How could that be? So I sort of think there's a new trend of people who are thinking, I want independence and freedom, and I don't want to be told what to do, and I don't want the government messing in my life, and I don't care about your sexual orientation or whether you're transgender or what you do with your body.
That has nothing to do with anything.
Right. But also, I understand the need for us to provide basic human rights and meet people's needs and not leave people underneath the floor. And that's okay for government to take that kind of intervention step.
If you want them to be a productive member of society, I think that would be the best move. And isn't that what we want? We want to be able to get people to work. And I think oftentimes that we have sides that are getting poisoned by certain ideologies. And you talk about certain types of political systems. You can look at capitalism or socialism or communism. I see them no more than tools to see what we can do as for our society from an economic and political standpoint. They're nothing more than tools, and you can mix and match.
Well, cool perspective. Thanks for joining us, Fort Walton Beach.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll catch you another time.
Thanks for being here. All right, guys. So I like that libertarian socialist. Actually, I really fascinated by that because again, you would think libertarians you tend to think are more conservative and more Republican. And I've always felt like, it's funny. I might have said this before. Roger Ailes, from Fox News said to the New York Times that I was a liberal libertarian, which is kind of a version of that, right? A libertarian socialist, But I love that because it's showing you the lines we've drawn, guys, aren't going to hold. So maybe that's my point. We need to be willing to consider tearing the lines down. Tyler, you're stuck on this, my friend. You are stuck on finding the truth of your point, which is no different than what the other side does. One protest was over something. You're stuck on the BLM thing because I brought it up. One protest was over something that was real. The other's over something that wasn't. Depends who you are. I hate to say it. Again, I believe systemic racism was real, but I don't believe most people protesting in the BLM protests were out there because they were actually knew what they were was really about. They were just on a bandwagon. And a lot of people think that what you're calling wasn't real was real. Granted, I don't think the election was stolen the way Trump says it was, but I think that there was an enormous amount of fraud and a lot of systemic fraud. And I think more importantly, a lot of people feel like they weren't allowed to voice those views or have those opinions or even bring it up without being inherently dismissed objectively by social media platforms and the media and anyone on the left. So they do feel they have a grievance. And my point isn't whether one's real or not real. It's all perception at this point, you guys. That's my point. We're getting stuck in I'm right, you're wrong. Again, back to my sports analogy. You know, you can watch it on replay and you can say, but see, the penalty shouldn't have happened because he never did it. He never hit him. There was no contact. He never put his helmet down. And the other side says he did, you know? So at the end of the day, you know, if you're going to make it about one side's right because what I believe was real and what you believe wasn't, you're not going to get anywhere. Because they think their side is real, and sadly, they think yours isn't. I know a lot of people who think the BLM protests were way exaggerated. The police brutalities toward Black people is way taken out of proportion. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm saying there are people who believe that. So if they don't believe what you believe, you think they're wrong. And my point is, if you're just going to be like, I'm right, you're wrong, my cause was good, your cause was bad, we're going to go in this endless cycle that's going to go nowhere. Yeah, I don't disagree, Monkey Arms. I've never been a fan. I've said I'm sure there was fraud. I don't think the fraud was at a large systemic scale. I don't believe there was, the machines were rigged. I don't think you could have done enough stuffing and moving and harvesting to ultimately move the number of votes you needed to move. A lot of a small scale. I think the systemic problem was fraud you couldn't even see because you just took down safeguards. But that said, I'm not trying to argue whether there was or wasn't fraud. I'm arguing that half the country thinks there was. When half the country thinks to some level this was messed up, we got a problem. Because we're not looking at a small percentage of people. We're looking at a split of half the country. I don't agree, Cruson. I think the GOP was going to be lucky to survive, period, in the form it's in. It's a tired, old party. But so is the Democratic Party. We are going to see, guys, a shift in the party structure. The progressives are going to redefine the Democratic Party. And good for AOC, by the way. I'm an AOC fan. You know why? Because AOC is not Nancy Pelosi. AOC didn't wake up and go, I want to be a career politician. AOC was a bartender with a lot of opinions who said, I'm going to run for office. And sometimes what she says doesn't make sense. She's young. She's figuring it out. Sometimes what she says makes total sense. But she's in there with her heart and her passion and her beliefs. They may change. They may evolve. She's a voice. But the progressives are going to redefine the Democratic Party. The old Democratic Party is going to crumble in around Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. And the old Republican Party is going to crumble in around Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, and by the way, you're going to see all the Kevin McCarthy type Republicans going, this should never have happened. This isn't the American way. We can't believe you did this. And they're going to lose a lot of people who are like, look, maybe we shouldn't have stormed into the Capitol, but again, nobody went in guns blazing, guys. Let's not make it like it was a terrorist attack. It was just a crowd getting out of hand. But most of those people weren't doing that. And the Republican Party, as we know it, is going to get redefined by a new breed, both parties, by a new breed of younger, more progressive or populist-minded in both sides of the party. Can I see Ingrid's comment? Can you put Ingrid's comment up? I mean, in Giggity's comment about Latinos.
A lot of people are asking about it.
Sorry, I didn't see it in Giggity.
You're good.
Let Black or Latino. 100%. 100%. In Giggity, I think that's a great point. And it's true. It is 100% true in my mind. The reaction of if a group of Black people had stormed Congress, there would have been a much more violent reaction to it. But again, I don't think the cops were nice to them to people or were, they kept talking about how the cops kind of moved people back peacefully. I don't think it was because they were Republican. It may be because they were white. I also think, and I'm not saying black people would have been disorderly, but I'm saying like around some of the like BLM protests, you had people screaming and yelling. I was in the front lines of those, screaming and yelling and right at the cops, and the cops were scared and defensive. And I don't know what it was like right up in the face of this, but to the core of what you're saying, Giggity, I absolutely agree that if a bunch of black people had charged up at Congress, 10,000 of them, whatever, it would have been a different response. And that's why I've said, I totally believe there is racism in policing. I've had black cops talk to me about it, that it gets built in. It's a whole nother show to talk, and we can talk about why that exists. But I am not for 1 second dismissing systemic racism or the degree or the inherent racism that's been built into our country or that still exists in some ways. I am merely saying BLM protests weren't always about that. And most of the people at them weren't about that. And most of the people at them weren't really that invested in the cause. It was a popular thing to do. The difference with this is a lot of the people you're seeing at these protests, they really, this is real to them. And either way, my closing thought on this is I just did. Yeah, Tyler just did. And I think it's a great point. But my closing thought on this, guys, is this. Again, it's asking you to step out of your boxes, okay? We are entering a new era, okay? We're entering a whole new era in what's going to happen in politics and in our society. To go back to my sports thing, one team has been playing like Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Well, not this year, Patriots, but, Bill Belichick played to win. Tom Brady played to win. Sometimes they cheated. They did what they had to do to win. And I'm not a Patriots fan. People know that, But my team, the Packers, had a coach who for 10 years just basically let the best quarterback in football only win one Super Bowl. He had a great team, and he was a lame coach. He didn't play to win, Mike McCarthy. And now he's at Dallas. Oh, and Dallas sucks. And the Packers are number one seed in the NFC. So what you're seeing is you are going to see a move on the right to start playing a hardball the way they think people on the left play it. And you guys on the left may think, no. You've been playing hardball too. They haven't. So all I'm saying is we're about to get two teams playing real hardball. The landscape's being redefined. All the labels are being redefined. Before you put me in a box, put me in a label, put someone else in a box, put them in a label. Think about it. It's all changing, Fort Walton Beach, a libertarian socialist. The new definitions, new ways of thinking about who we are and how we align ourselves are going to happen. And the political landscape is going to shift. It's going to shift massively and radically. And we are going to have the next 6 months are going to be a clash of ideas. And we're going to see a lot more, not necessarily violence, but a lot more protests and a lot more of what we saw today. And scary for a lot of you, you're going to see Donald Trump running for re-election in 2024 and probably announcing it the day Joe Biden is inaugurated. Look, Trump has managed to maintain the limelight, the headlines, the focus, no matter what. The media is obsessed with them. They can't help themselves. Somehow Trump is still the story. Somehow Trump is still the most powerful voice there is. Somehow Trump is going to trump Biden on Inauguration Day and get more coverage. He's a genius at it. I'm not defending it. It's a reality. It's the era we live in, the social media era. Get ready for more. Thank you guys for watching. It's been a fun show. Appreciate y'all.